But for the last few weeks, Donald Trump has tried really, really hard to get a certain message across about the thing he is apparently trying desperately to hunt down.
We want to weed out the corruption, tremendous fraud and corruption and waste. Waste, corruption, and radical left lunacy. Corruption. Very corrupt people. Very corrupt. Corrupt. A lot of corruption.
But here's the thing. I mean, just because you say something over and over and over, it doesn't make it true. And when Trump and Musk are pressed to provide any actual evidence that their grand plan is actually rooting out mass fraud and corruption in the government, they come up very short. What is becoming increasingly clear is that they're not really after corruption at all. They're simply after stuff they just don't like for whatever reason. I mean, what is also clear is that when it comes to Donald Trump, every accusation is usually some form of a confession. I mean, let me put it this way. If they were actually hunting for the corruption, it might get a little bit uncomfortable in there because the call is kind of coming from inside the house here, guys. I mean, I can even point you in many of the right directions, like Trump freezing a U.S. law, banning the bribery of foreign officials, a law that has previously hit suppliers for Tesla, or Musk attacking the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a bureau that would have cracked down on his attempts to turn X into a digital payment platform, or the administration planning to lay off thousands of IRS employees, a move that stands to benefit the richest taxpayers. I wonder who falls into that category. Or Trump pardoning former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who was convicted of trying to sell a U.S. Senate seat. Or Trump firing inspectors general, whose literal job is to find corruption in the government. You could also look at Musk's meeting with Indian Prime Minister Modi this week. You know, the one you can see there, where they sat in front of a U.S. and an Indian flag, just like a bilateral meeting. A meeting that even Trump doesn't seem to know the reason behind.
I don't know. They met. And I assume he wants to do business in India. I would imagine he met possibly because, you know, he's running a company. He's doing this as something that he's felt strongly about for a long time.
I mean, so was Musk there as a government official for this country, or as a CEO for himself, or maybe as a fake government official so he could make some better business deals? Who knows? Anything's possible. Even the president doesn't know. Seems like the kind of fuzziness, though, you'd want to avoid if you were really laser focused on rooting out corruption in government, right? I mean, luckily, Trump says he will personally oversee whether or not Musk has any conflicts of interest, which clearly seems to be going very well so far. But nothing encapsulates this administration's embrace of corruption better than the case of New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Now, this is a guy who faces actual corruption charges for conspiracy, bribery, and fraud. All those things that Trump and Musk claim to care so much about. But earlier this week, acting U.S. Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais ordered federal prosecutors to drop those charges against Adams, saying it hampered Adams' ability to tackle illegal immigration and violent crime. Right, the two have nothing to do with each other, which I know you know. Now, the message there is pretty clear. Never mind the law. Forget the evidence of corruption, of which there's plenty. You do our bidding, and then we'll make it like it never happened. And if you're thinking that sounds very shady, it's because it is very shady. And it has now prompted at least 7 federal prosecutors to resign. First was Danielle Sassoon, who was the U.S. attorney, acting U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, who once clerked, by the way, for conservative Supreme Court Justice Scalia. And she wrote a pretty stunning letter on her way out. She described a meeting where the mayor's attorneys, quote, repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, indicating that Adams would be in a position to assist with the department's enforcement priorities only if the indictment were dismissed. So that was the acting U.S. attorney, who once clerked for Scalia, by the way, accusing the Trump Justice Department of participating in a quid pro quo with the Adams team. Now, you do something for us, and these charges will go away. But Danielle Sassoon wasn't going to do that. And after she resigned, 6 other prosecutors resigned because they would neither. And on the very same day those prosecutors resigned en masse, taking a stand against actual corruption, it sure seemed like Eric Adams was trying to make good on his end of the deal. I mean, Adams met with Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, and agreed to open up Rikers Island to ICE agents, which is a significant shift in the city's sanctuary policy, and is exactly what Homan said he told Adams to do. It's almost as if he has something on him. And then the very next day, there was Adams on the set of Fox and Friends, right next to Tom Homan. And I want you to just listen to part of what Homan had to say to Adams.
If he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City, and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to?
That's what I would call a very uncomfortable and nervous laugh on Adams' part there. But I mean, just to pause on this for a moment, there were mass resignations because of this suspected quid pro quo. And then they literally went on television and announced that quid pro quo on Fox. If you felt a little crazy watching that, well, you're not alone. That's how I felt. It was a threat to make sure someone carries out their end of the mob-like deal. That's what we just heard there. It was exactly the kind of thing you'd want to stop if you were a leader on the hunt for corruption and fraud, as they say they are. But instead of stopping it, the administration is perpetrating it. They are labeling things they don't like as corrupt so they can go after them while they cultivate and celebrate real corruption when it serves them. I guess if they do it or their friends do it, it's not corruption. And if you don't just have to take my word for it, obviously. Take a look at this post from Trump yesterday where he said, quote, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." I know that may sound like a weird fortune cookie message, but he's telling us that he gets a free pass to break the law under the guise of saving the country, in his definition of it. Just like he gets a free pass to do whatever he wants under the guise of rooting out his version of corruption. The word hypocritical doesn't even begin to cut it. But if they ever decide they want to root out actual corruption, I can think of a few places for them to start, and I bet so can my next guest. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York. Before going to Congress, he was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. Congressman, it's great to see you. You're the perfect person to talk to. I just mentioned you obviously previously worked in the SDNY office. You called the move to dismiss Mayor Adams' case a dark day for the DOJ. I think a lot of people share that. I know what I think looks like happened here, but I'm just curious as a former prosecutor, when you saw Mayor Adams sitting side by side with Tom Homan on Fox News Friday morning, agreeing essentially to the administration's immigration demands, I felt like I was taking crazy pills. But what did you think when you were watching that?
Yeah, well, when you think of a conspiracy, right, you think about a predetermined agreement to do something. Now, for a conspiracy, you don't actually have to complete the objective of the conspiracy to charge it. But what we saw on Friday morning was the completion, was the confirmation of the agreement that Eric Adams would provide assistance to Donald Trump's immigration policies in return for having his case dropped. And lest you think that Adams is free not to follow Trump's orders, this extraordinary agreement allows the DOJ to recharge Eric Adams in November based in part on whether or not he cooperates with Trump. It is an outright extortion. And what's even more extraordinary to me, Jen, as a 10-year veteran of the Department of Justice, was the original memo that Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove wrote directing the dismissal of this case, in something that I don't think you will ever see in any other official document from the Department of Justice. He said that the charging decision that he was directing was specifically not based on the evidence and not based on the law. So therefore, it can only be improper because those are the only things that the Department of Justice should be relying on. And then as you read it on, it's all about policy agreement and implementing immigration policy. It's so out of bounds that you saw 7 prosecutors resign because they knew, Republicans, Federalist Society members, Scalia clerks, Roberts clerks, because they know that this is way outside the bounds of the Department of Justice. It's I think the most significant event since the Saturday Night Massacre in the Department of Justice.
It was indeed a Valentine's Day massacre of sorts on Friday. And there's so much more I think we're waiting to happen here. There's obviously a lot of legal questions. There are political questions. And I want to ask you about some of those because Governor Hochul can invoke, as far as I think we all understand it, her authority to remove Mayor Adams from office. So far, she has not done that. She told my colleague Rachel Maddow she needed time to figure out the right approach. That was a couple days ago. One of your colleagues in the New York delegation, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says she should remove him. What do you think Governor Hochul should do? Should she remove Adams from office?
Well, look, I think Eric Adams has one play here to actually try to continue to be mayor. And that's if he stood up and did the right thing and said, you know what, this is an extortion scheme. You are extorting me in order to relieve me of the charges against me, and I am not going to play that game. So either, Department of Justice, you dismiss my case because you don't think it should have been brought, or you don't. And obviously that would require him to stand up to the Department of Justice and to risk a trial and risk going to prison, which it does not seem like he wants to do. But if he does not do that, then he cannot serve as the mayor of New York City while he is beholden to Donald Trump. His allegiances would be more to Donald Trump than it would be to New York City, and that's just an impossible situation for any mayor to be in.
Undoubtedly. I mean, as you said, it's a version of blackmail. That's not a legal term, but that's how I kind of heard what you described previously. But if he doesn't do that, and I think we'd all be surprised if he does what you just said, we'll see. Should the governor and take her power to remove him from office so that New York City is not in a position where they have somebody who is a version of a hostage to the president sitting in the mayor's office?
Look, I hope we don't get there, Jen. I really do. I think that would be an even sadder day, not satir, but sadder day than what we're dealing with right now. I expect that there will be a resolution among, the leaders of our political establishment in New York that hopefully would avoid something like that, which would be a tremendous distraction. But it is very clear that if you are beholden to a president whose immigration policies also violate New York City law, then you cannot serve as mayor.